This is a microbot. It doesn't look like much, but when it links up with the rest of its pals, things get a little more interesting. The microbots are controlled with this neurotransmitter. I think what I want them to do, they do it. The applications of this tech are limitless. Construction. What used to take teams of people working by hand for months or years can now be accomplished by one person. And that's just the beginning. How about transportation? Microbots can move anything, anywhere, with ease. If you can think it, microbots can do it. The only limit is your imagination. Microbots.
2-1. All right. I'm here with a guest we're going to call Angel. He contacted me through instant messaging and Facebook. He has proprietary information about the makeup of these fires, the origins. He has much experience in the field of technology, vast experience, as you'll understand more in the field of technology. And I really appreciate you, sir, coming on. We're going to use him the name Angel because a lot of the information he's sharing is new to all of us, and we need to disseminate and understand how deep, how vast, how advanced, how micro particulate matters work and whatnot. But sir, I appreciate you coming on. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is, like, how did you get so much information? You were just telling me about being a kid and you were always curious and wanting to know.
Yeah, so like I was saying, it just kind of happened of being a kid, just being curious of like how everything works and tearing everything apart, things I probably shouldn't have. Because it upset my parents quite a bit every time I tear apart a TV they just bought, or a microwave, and just kind of trying to put things back together. So it kind of led me in the direction of manufacturing and technology and magnetics and electricity and electrons, and then obviously chemistry follows. But that being said, when you get to an age, you kind of find the fields the fields of work kind of finds you, So falling into that line of work of kind of in the sciences of building. I'm trying to phrase this in a way now so documented, so I'm not stepping on my own toes. So you got to forgive me for being kind of vague, extremely vague. But anyhow, being in the sciences of production and manufacturing, of research and development, it's very compartmentized. But after a certain length of time of doing so, you're able to put parts and pieces together and start understanding what you've really been working on over years of manufacturing.
Now, what's your schooling? Were you an engineer in school?
No, as a matter of fact, well, a lot of people try to call me an engineer, and I kind of refuse that title at all. But no, I am absolutely not educated in college outside of self-education. I've gone to college, but I actually, believe it or not, was a high school dropout. And because I refused the institution of school itself, and had quite a few debates with my teachers growing up as far as what they were trying to teach me and what I was able to do research on my own and then bring it to their curriculum and go, well, that's false. And with that, at the age of probably 16, 17, I clearly had a better understanding of what they were teaching of their mantra versus what the historians of the day were actually had already recorded. And with that refusal of them wanting to have a healthy discussion of education, they just wanted, for me to pass a test of what they wanted, basically a brainwashing, the way I seen it. So I quickly found myself kind of excusing myself out of that system, and then going down the basically research and development of my own free will, trying to be in line with as much philosophy as possible, trying not to fill up my glass, always leaving my mind open for the impossible. And ironically, science fiction, it was, for most people that find themselves in these industries, believe it or not, really do find science fiction as a science fact. And that's because it is. And it's even more so prevalent today. But if you go all the way back to, when Star Trek came out, they had, wireless communication, they had ion drives. That's what the USS Enterprise was driven on. Well, that's what they so-called, our ion drives and our satellites. That's what we use today. We have, flip cell phones back when they started to be more developed, wireless communication. So when those things were unfathomable, space travel and all those technologies, which were just supposedly made up and then spoon-fed to the public as entertainment, was actually fact. So when you put that haze of imaginary, well, this isn't really real, but you're really going to be entertained by it, and then 20 years down the road, you're purchasing or your objects are being propelled by them, it's easier to accept subliminally. But going way off track here, back to the question of, am I engineering?
Well, how did you get into science and all the knowledge you have about lasers and technologies from being autodidactic, I call it, or self-taught?
So basically, I took a job for a specific company that did manufacturing and subcontracting through various agencies, and excelled through the ranks, if you want to call it that, or found to be trusted with the materials and the ability to complete tasks within precision levels. And that being said, you get put in positions of being responsible for fulfilling those tasks, and it goes in a progression of, the better you are at something, the more trusted you are with it, and the more freedoms you get. And that's kind of a common thread, but you're always kind of put in a box of what your realm of experience is. And so I kind of refused that to a certain degree, which allowed me to expand on that. And a lot of the stuff, as far as the lasers, in which a lot of them went to a lot of colleges and universities for, I guess I'm not going to say the names, so no point, because it should be common knowledge that these research and development places, they don't build anything in these universities. They farm that out to other people. Those people, me being one of them in the past, would build these hypothetical devices, and then they would then run their tests on them, and then that would go to the next grants or the people who originally purchased them. Now,
just to stop you for a quick sec. So you were working. Can you talk about SDI? Do you want to talk about Star Wars?
No, because I can't say specifically if that particular branch of people had purchased some of the orders of the devices that we had been making.
Right.
And again, I can almost say that, yeah, for more than likely, is that's really what they specialize in. But they're not the only ones. It's across the board. It's not just in here in what we call the United States of America, or the United States as an entity. But it's across the boards in any realm of people who delve in science, and even more so now, which they're pushing is the quantum physics.
Right.
But again, that's out of my. I'm now retired. I'm out of that
you
realm.
were talking about the experience that you worked with thermal heat and working out with aircraft or rockets or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, so one of the first projects I kind of worked on was, which now is declassified, which is, I can speak about that, but that's the heat-seeking missile back when it was being perfected. The eye in the front of that missile needs to be extremely cool, and so in doing so, there's a manufacturing process of multiple parts that get assimilated, and then cool that eye so that way it can pick up the thermal imaging at an extremely fast rate, and be able to track and then move the projectile in the direction it needs to go. So that was kind of one of the first projects I really got my teeth on, as far as working in that direction, not knowing what I was building at the time, because it was very compartmentalized, and you got to sign these materials in and sign those materials out. You weigh your waste as far as you ship material. It's all very, very, you can't stick stuff in your pockets and walk out the door kind of stuff. Very exotic materials you work with, stuff that we don't. The metallurgy is given to us by the vendors, if you want to call them that. So we would go ahead and everything was controlled extremely heavily, all the way through the manufacturing process. But
is this military control or corporate control?
So on our side, it's actually a security clearance on our side that you get to be able to work with that material first and foremost, and that goes through the vetting process. But so after you're vetted and you kind of get the okay through your local corporate, the person that basically signs your check, then they say, okay, they hand you a set of prints, and they say, go ahead and you need this particular material, and you look it up on your prints. You go and sign it out. You have it weighed. And then you go ahead and manufacture your part. You have it all redundantly checked, and then you weigh the actual part when it's done. Or we don't, but a third party inside the building would do that redundancy, and they would also weigh the chip as well. So that way, all materials are accounted for within a specific plus or minus degree of what's to be expected to be unretrievable. So they definitely wanted to keep a control on them specific metallurgy that was being used on some of these projects. Not all of them, but the majority of them.
So how did you get into nanotechnology? How did you get experience with that?
So that came later on, and it was more just kind of after years of being in these different industries and bouncing around, closer towards the end of my career, as far as delving into when I started manufacturing things under 40 or 100 times microscope, you start to realize that when you're making vacuum chambers that are the size of humans, if not larger. Basically the machinery had to be remade just to manufacture these large vacuum chambers that all these micro parts would go into, and then you'd start asking, you get to a point where you can go, well, okay, what's really going on here? And then some people will kind of give you a hint that are on the higher up, and then you just got to put the dots together, and then you start realizing, well, you're building, crystalline replicating and they're put in these vacuum chambers to be built. Or once you plant the seed pod, then the rest goes from there. It just needs, depending on how it goes about. I'm trying to not give too much.
No, it's okay. I just want to give the audience an idea of what we're talking about. So a nano size at the nano level, if we consider, this is from AZO Nano, if we consider the distance between the Earth and the Sun to be analogous to 1 millimeter, then the length of 1 nanometer is the distance from New York to Boston. So 238,000 miles, they say the Earth is from the Sun. No, 93 million miles, Earth from the Sun. And then New York to Boston is maybe a few hundred miles. So that gives 93 million to a few hundred miles. So you can understand the microscopy, the microscopic elements of we're dealing with. It gets in between the brain-blood barrier. It's so small. There's nothing really that it can't penetrate.
That's very true. And even if it couldn't have penetrated, it could wormhole its way through it. Because you have the organic matter that it needs to replicate. It's basically they're parasites. You want to look at it on that level to kind of wrap your head around it. And not all of them are. I mean, some are used to absorb oxygen, which is known to be, this was something that was declassified. So, from my knowledge anyhow, in the military complex of specific Marines, they called them like a Marine 2.0. And during field training, they used the standard, soldiers for training, and then they used the 2.0. And the ones that were given the nanotechnology for being able to super oxygenate and super nitrate their blood, which would then give them that stamina. And they superseded the course like there was, just basically made a standard human look evil. It was embarrassing, and they had no problem bragging about it on open, TV or recorded documentation that they were, the 2.0. And so that's why I honestly believe that has to be a completely declassified and open, non-debatable subject. So if you have nanocells that are able to replicate the blood cell and deliver that system that's needed for the body to do that, then if you can get your head around that, then just take it that next step further. What else can you do?
Yeah, just to justify, to elucidate what you're saying, I did a whole 3-hour series on touchless torture, and they talk about these nanobots, self-assembling nanobots that go right onto your nervous system, and they basically are read-write, where they could communicate RFID to the handlers, to logarithmic computers, and they can control your entire nervous system. And then they have synapse brain replacers that get in between the two hemispheres of your brain, and they can literally control the right and left connectivity and communication between your brain patterns. This is old technology. This is 15, 20 years ago, right? And so,
easily. Yeah. And like I was, I may or may not have stated earlier with you, but this technology supersedes itself so rapidly that it from someone that's just getting in or just trying to understand this, and there's so many open documents that you were able to easily research, or I would like to think it'd be easy to research, even though I don't think very many people do a lot of research nowadays. They're more into entertainment, but if they watch the entertainment closely, the tech is there. It's in the entertainment, but it's made in a way to where it's not absorbed as a factual, real thing. They think it's just CGI, or in a lot. And it's not saying it's not CGI. It is definitely, but they're letting you know, hey, this is the technology that we have, and is used, and it's not necessarily used in the military complex. They're more private. I would call them branch-off societies. And that's a well-known fact as well. But anyone who wanted to or had the tenacity to do the research would be able to learn this for themselves as well.
All right, and then I want to read this to you. This is from spectrum.ieee.org, the International Electron. We're talking about also Li-Fi. We're going to talk about Li-Fi, which is the advanced Wi-Fi, which is using light, on and off light, to turn the lasers on and off, to turn the biomechanical devices. So quoting this, using only optical microscopy, I'm going to get that word right, the researchers could distinguish between semiconductor silicon and gold nanoparticles by observing their mechanical responses to light. This method is contactless, cheap compared with traditional measurement techniques. In addition, the researcher believed that the combination of light and electric field effect could be used to reconfigure micro or nanomechanical switches or antennas and be coupled with micro machines for electronic and biomedical applications. Quote, I considered the discovery effect of mechanical analogy of the field effect transistors, or FETs, the building blocks of CPUs that have revolutionized society. And FET switches on and off in response to an externally applied voltage. Our device switches among multiple mechanical rotation modes in response to light intensity, which is instant and can be repeated many times. Can you apply what we're saying right here to, let's get into the embers of the fires, if you want to, in the nanotechnology?
Yeah, so the fact that you're able to read that, so that's interesting because about 25 years ago-ish, I was in contact with someone that was kind of if you want to call it, a whistleblower. But he basically was kind of going around and saying, hey, look what's coming down the pipeline. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I mean, like, you're talking, we had built a relationship of trust. And he goes, all I can say, just look out for blue. And for years, I could not think like blue, and it just stuck with me, blue. And as time goes on, LEDs became more and more prevalent, and if you understand how the light-emitting diode works, it works under a blue spectrum, and that blue spectrum is actually the frequency that is your on-off switch or your energy transfer switch, and your eyes only see a specific spectrum of light, but that blue, so you don't see that blue light. So that blue light in that spectrum is that energy wave form. The light is energy, to make that clear. And it's also it transfers through your body, and any so-called mass, if you want to call it that. So you can literally beam that blue light right through a building, and that's how you get. That's a lot of these opticals that are now used in the satellite and other. I'm kind of going off on the little side, but I'm kind of bringing it back to a whole. With that nanotechnology, before it became nanotechnology, they're using on a visual spectrum, basically gathering data, and that light would be sent out. And this was the emphasis of all, or the beginning of all this, from what I understand. And they could beam that light that was completely unrecognizable by any human with the naked eye, and then be able to see through walls, see objects and the different densities, and because of that light, it would act like a radar or Wi-Fi, if you want to call it that. And that is what now is coined the word Wi-Fi. But that was basically where it began, and then just progressed into, well, what else can we use that technology with? And then that became in kind of the trigger mechanism of that nanotechnology, which is very easily can be an incendiary device. You can program any nanotechnology to anything you want, and given a life expectancy. When I first looked at the videos that were being uploaded by what I consider very few survivors of the Paradise Fire, it's shameful to call it a campfire. That's just a smack in the face, if you ask me. And up in Reading, the car fire, and down south.
Now, sir, you were in the fires, right? You got attacked up in Reading, right?
Yeah. So I was able to experience the fires firsthand in Northern California, and so the same telltale sign comes through of those nanotechnologies, and this is how blatant it is, that FEMA or which group, like one of these groups actually posted a nanoparticulate accelerant, and that's just calling it out for what it is.
FEMA did that. I released that. I put it on my Facebook. That FEMA released it, that they were using there was nanoparticulate matter they found in the ashes.
So if you ask me, and you are, that is exactly what we're talking about. So that nanoparticulate. So really, it's not coming from me. This information isn't coming from me. This information is coming from FEMA to you. And then then you take that and you put it on the video, and then watch those embers fly against the wind, hover in groups, and then find their way into cracks and crevices, because that's what they do. And they incinerate at such high temperatures. That's why the color or the spectrum, and you're not going to pick all that up on video of these cell phones, because they have filters in them.
That's the blue. That's the blue we see. We see the blue. Is that what you're talking about? When we see the blue light?
That is exactly. Well, you're getting the blue light because of the heat of the incendiary device, which would be the nanotechnologies that are clustering together. And eventually they just turn into almost like a talcum powder. So that is just one spectrum of the attacks.
So what you're saying is what I'm learning too, is these embers are basically nanobots. I mean, swarming nanobots of fire embers that are controlled in masses, and they artificial intelligence, and they can group together in any type of form or shape. The GPS, they can locate anything they want, and then they will incinerate. And then, as you were saying, after they incinerate, you see that white dust, that's them self-imploding, self-destructing. But they can manufacture themselves. They can self-replicate into much bigger sizes too, right?
Absolutely, and they don't necessarily have to be very large to be destructive. They just have to be of numbers. So when they replicate in numbers. But the size that I was able to witness, not only firsthand with my own eyes. And I've been in a wildfire, a true wildfire. You can't call these wildfires. Wildfires do not selectively burn and not burn. A fire burns at a fuel rate. So you got to go back to raw science and raw chemistry, and that we know. And we know that everything has a flashing point. And that being said, with just a little bit of deployed common sense, you can decipher what's reality and what's a fictitious, made-up scheme of just a mantra. And the reality is that unless you have another technology at hand, wood cannot burn at the rate to melt aluminum. Now, coal can, but under controlled circumstances, like a forge. Well, a forest fire is not a forge.
Plus it has to build heat. I mean, a fuel in a fire only gets up to 1,700 degrees on record. I mean,
and those are exasperated. I got to say, those are exasperated.
Still, it makes the point that whatever they're saying is bullshit. Absolute, complete bullshit. But now we've got...
I agree with you.
Yeah, and so the narrative that these nanobots, self-replicating, programmable, I'm doing a show I'm doing next on how they can use their minds to control swarms of robots through your brain patterns now. The technology's that advanced. But how do they take like compacting these nanobots, and we got to think in really small sizes. So they pack, we were talking hundreds of thousands, millions of these packed into a tiny ball. So the laser that comes down, is that the incinerant? Is that the one that actually activates the bots?
So after kind of looking at the footage of not only first-hand footage for myself and also through my own two eyes of the fire in Northern California, and you can see that there's multiple deployments of different aspects that were used in what I would say every fire that's been since probably 2017 or even 2016. And they all have the same signature all the way up until now. I think, I'd like to think that the hand was a little overplayed with this last fire, and I really would like to think people would wake up from this and see that this truly is an attack, and it's not anything else but that. But there's a huge problem with that, because now you have on the other side, the programming with that blue light, whether it be an on-off switch to this particular bot, it's also could be programmed into the minds to have people just completely disregard what's going on, and that's a scary thought, because if you look at the way the light works with the eyes and even Wi-Fi itself, it's so easy to program a mind or make someone think a specific way with the right technology.
Right, and Li-Fi, so people know, is a two-way communication device. They use the flicker rate of the light that going on and off at a very high intensity to program you or read anything in your home. I mean, this is Alexa on steroids. Every LED light is a Li-Fi machine that's recording, adjusting frequency modulations. I mean, and how many people have LEDs? How many stores have LEDs? Everybody, right?
Everyone does, yeah, and so being in the industry, I had when LEDs first came out, 20 some odd years ago, when I was manufacturing the very small vacuum chambers at the time, they were growing these crystallines, or the actual chips that they used to light emitting diodes. They polarized them or send an electricity through, if you want to call it, just keep it on layman's terms. You send a current through the light-emitting diode in one direction, and it transmits light at whatever frequency you deem, depending on what voltage and hertz you're going to send that at. And then now, if you turn that around and you receive or you emit light, you'll actually, into that light-emitting diode, it'll actually produce electricity. So at a zero net gain. So you can literally transmit that energy, light beam, across and reflect it through the atmosphere or anywhere you want, and have, if let's say you send it 1 watt downstream, you're going to receive 1 watt downstream. So
there's no loss. When you say that there's no loss, there's no loss of whatever you're transferring, right?
Absolutely not. There's no loss. There's no resistance. And it is instant, and that's what makes it so the human body is so susceptible to it, because you can't see it. You don't recognize it in the reality that you're in, and it's so easily dismissed, even though it's right in front of your face. When you see the swarming embers, that people think that's fire, it's not. It's literally... It's
programmable matter.
Right.
So here I'm going to read you a quote, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, you're talking about the sci-fi writers. Arthur C. Clarke helped give the vision to NASA. Quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
There you go.
And it says right here, this is from engineering.com, programmable matter is essentially what it sounds like. Matter that can change its physical properties, such as its shape and optical characteristics, based on a user's input. This definition ranges from something as simple as liquid crystals, which you were talking about, which can be altered by the application of an electric field, to something as sci-fi as the shape-shifting liquid metal T-1000 from the Terminator franchise. And they have modular robotics. They have all these different types, metamaterials, all these different types, claytronics, promise of programmable matter going forward. Go ahead.
All right. So I just wanted to add in real quick that the eclipse fire complex correlated with the car fire as far as its signatures and the way it jumped and the way the embers, or so-called embers, kind of ran up and down California in the way it just happened to also follow on the eclipse, which is part of this ritualistic system that they follow.
So the eclipse fire, was that the one after the car fire, or was it adjacent to the car fire?
It was exactly when the eclipse came through.
And was the car fire going at the same time?
I think it was right. I think the car fire happened right after.
Right, I remember that. It was like one, and then there was another fire that hit up on 5, and then also, people don't talk about it, but up in Oregon, right at the California border up there was fires 2-3 weeks before that was out of control.
Yeah, that was up in Brookings off the, I can't remember what that river is that runs through there, Checo River. So Brookings, Checo River, which spreads across both the Oregon and California border, was the fire lines, which then went down all the way through Hoopa and down to the Yola-Bolas, which is all part of the Eclipse complex fire. They grouped it up into one.
That's what they do. They take all the separate ones. We had 170 fires in Santa Rosa on one night. They've only identified 13 of them. I mean, this isn't just the car fire or the campfire. These are multiple event attacks.
Exactly, and so that's one of their strategic facets, is that if they can get you to focus on one focal point, you forget about all the other ones. So that's why it's so important to keep an open mind and allow your mind to truly investigate everything and see the whole picture instead of just the focal point.
All right, and then let's shift gears here, and this is an add-on that we were talking about after we finished the show, but you were talking about the hospital, the radiology unit inside Paradise. Can you tell me what you were just telling again, that story?
Yeah, that is part of the hospital that did burn. I know that they were saying that, the hospital burnt down, and I heard all kinds of reports, and then someone that we knew that did get out, that was out of Paradise, but did work in the hospital. That the only part of the hospital that was on fire and did burn was the radiology building, which is a separate building in the back of the hospital. There was definitely a fire barrier between it and any greenery. The greenery didn't burn. The radiology building burned. So the radiology building, the reason why it's separate is because it emits, radioactive electromagnetic waves. And they keep that in a specific Faraday cage building. But it definitely received enough to overload that equipment, and that fire broke out from the inside out, not from the outside in. It's a concrete building.
And what do we use radiology in hospitals for?
Well, to look through the body and to be able to recognize parts of the body and isolate very specific points of the body. And that goes hand in hand with what you're seeing with the isolating burns and burning areas in the programming of this.
Does the building, do the people have to be grounded, do you think, if they're going to be, vaporized or torched? Is grounding a part of this?
Yeah, I do believe so. And if you look at, just to go back to the car fire and up and down 299 West, if you look at all the guardrails that burnt, which is the timbers on those, I know that they treated them years and years and years ago with creosote to help the rot from rotting out. But anyone who knows that's burned anything that's soaked in creosote, you need a tremendous amount of coal beds to keep it burning, because it's intended not to burn. It's actually an anti-inflammatory and also an anti-rotting substance, which is no longer used in California because of the carcinogen as well. But the bolts that held the guardrail in, that the wood posts, then because the creosote went through the bolts, touching the creosote down into the ground, grounded that, disintegrated enough bolts to drop the guardrails, then the guardrails grounded and then continued down the line, creating a chain reaction, basically connecting that circuit, becoming the fuse.
Wow. So but explain again to me, because how did the wood was grounded into the asphalt, into the earth? So what was grounding?
The creosote,
Oh, the creosote and the treatment of the wood is what grounded it. Oh yeah. Okay. Makes total sense now. You just gave us another notch of understandings. Thank you.
Yeah, because if you think about it, water itself doesn't actually. It's an insulator until you put suspended solids in it. So you have to put. Excuse me for that. You have to put an electrolyte in it in order for it to conduct electricity. So you have to be able to get the electrons to move from point A to point B, and you need a grounding system to do that because it's on a DC current or direct current. You need to go from point A to point B. And that's why they went and replaced all those wooden guardrails that had disintegrated to dust, even though 3 feet from them, twigs the size of a quarter inch or smaller were left untouched or just, a typical char.
Right.
But those, 10 by 10 timbers had disintegrated because of the way they are grounded, and those frequencies are running through that like a giant fuse.
Gotcha. And then we went up to Paradise the first time. They were replacing the guardrails. I mean, this is like 2-3 weeks after the event. They're replacing the guardrails. They're
doing that because it's evidence. Right. They're not replacing it because they want the guardrails back up there.
Well, they're certainly not helping the people to move back in.
No, but they're covering tracks right now. They're covering all the telltale signs of what is evidence. The cars are the evidence. The guardrails are the evidence. The microscopic dust. Every home is evidence. So what they're doing is getting rid of the evidence. It's no different than the supposed plane that hit the Pentagon. The first thing they did was make a bigger hole, start a fire, and then put 7 feet of soil of layers on layers on layers, covering up and removing all the debris. That's not how you do an investigation.
Right. Well, no. I mean, it just like newspaper reporters. I mean, they don't report news. They're just parrots. But so if Angel, if we've been using the term directed energy weapons, are we still correct to use that terminology with now what we understand the event horizon is?
Sure. It's still a directed energy weapon, no matter how you look at it. And it's not just a singular weaponized mechanism that they're using or that is being used.
It's multiple focuses, multiple purposes. What I say is multiple purposes and multiple events. They're harvesting the trees. They only burn the trees up 20 feet and only the bark, and that ponderosa pine is still completely harvestable. They got PG&E laying in, all these cables everywhere, and they're clearing the roads up for the train tracks. I mean, they're doing many, many things, but it's understanding that it's a multi-pronged attack. It's like an octopus, right?
Sure. Matter of fact, I think it was in 2017 or 2016, right around there was a TED Talks that had a particular forestry think tank individual got on there and said that, quote unquote, we have an epidemic of trees. Anyone that knows anything about atmospheric moisture and growth and life, that we depend on those trees not just for oxygen, because oxygen is just a very small part of the air that we breathe that's around us. We breathe all different kinds of gases, but what we really depend on is the moisture in the air. So when you remove the trees, you remove the moisture. And on old growth forest, that's why clouds will appear just at the tips of the trees, because at a specific temperature and pressure, the needles will start to form upwards, and when it does, it releases out the moisture that's in there just to a point to where they, on a molecular level, almost like a reverse osmosis system, and then puts it into the atmosphere, and those clouds will hover around and then eventually come out and then drop that moisture out of the air in areas that's needed for more new growth.
And that's how the giant sequoias live. I mean, they live by the fog. They live by the water that comes, the moisture that comes from the fog that rolls in. And you and I are here on the coast and around here, we don't get fog anymore. These trees, these old redwood growths are dying. And then you got Moonbeam Brown saying, well, maybe we should clear cut all the trees because they're fire hazards. I mean, give me a break.
Is that a quote from him? Did he actually say that?
He's passing law that this is going to happen.
See, that's criminal.
It's all criminal.
I guess that correlates with that think tank back in 2016, 2017 of that, and I couldn't believe it was on TED Talks. I used to really watch TED Talks until I started listening to this agenda, if you want to call it that, of deception coming out, and to say to anyone and get them to believe it is what's more astonishing, or ignore it is the most scariest part. When someone says that what we have is an epidemic of trees. That's like saying we have an epidemic of fresh water. It doesn't make any sense.
It's like saying we don't need our lungs to live.
Correct. And I personally witnessed a few days after the Paradise Fire, I was up at Central Valley. I think they renamed that town to Shasta Lake City now. And one of the Emerson sawmills are up there, and it's their large sawmill. So they only cut the large butt logs, where the first few logs that come off of the older trees are big trees. And I was just at the entry point. There's a restaurant there. I was having lunch with my wife, and it was out on the front patio, sunny day. And about every 5 minutes, a truck and load would come in. Every 5 minutes, on the money. And you could clearly see that, and there were 4 logs, 5 logs, maximum 6 logs to a full truck. Now that's a really healthy board foot yield for a logging truck. You're talking huge money for every truck. But not one tree on the inside was burnt, and almost none of the bark was damaged to the cambium layer, which is the lifeline of the trees. A lot of people don't understand the way trees grow. They grow from the top up, and they grow from the outside out. So that outside bark is its protective layer. The only way to damage that is to burn all the way through the cambium layer, and you still have to go almost 180 degrees around to make a permanent aspect. And even then, personally, I've seen trees up to 5 and 6 foot in diameter that have been burnt at 180 degrees, hollowed out, it's called cat face, from fires over time, over hundreds of years, cut in old growth timber, and it still stand and be perfectly healthy until the point it gets cut down. So there's absolutely no reason for those trees to be harvested outside of monetary gain. And to be done that quickly was very shocking.
Well, and what you alluded to earlier, it's oxygen. It's what we live to breathe on. You take away the trees, you take away life. True.
But you got to understand too that the oceans are more key to that, because the seagrasses and the plankton put out roughly 70 to 80% of the oxygen of the earth. Now that's speculative because the sources are not necessarily independent, but again, all that is dying.
We're showing that the oceans are deoxifying as well. I mean, we're seeing carbon sequestration. I mean, all these crap they're talking about, but and that's why I get back to this article about children having heart attacks. I mean, oxygen to live in your blood-brain barrier, it's critical. So if they take away the trees, they suck the oxygen out, it's going to make people more ill. It's going to be difficult for all of us. And it's I don't know.
It makes a very difficult living environment for people who can't afford the equipment that is available to the people who can afford the equipment to heal the cancers and heavy metal toxicities. So it's not that the equipment's not available; it's just not available to everybody. And I know that sounds very conspiratorial, but it's just true. And like a given fact of how our watersheds are being treated. There was a local company up here that was having a water shortage into their tributary for a specific water company, and their solution to allow this tributary to gain more water was to cut the trees away from that tributary 150 feet on either side away from that tributary. And yes, it did add more water, but it killed all the soil around it. And now they have a huge, 10 years down the road, there's this huge problems they're running into with the water becoming toxified with the heavy metals, the erosion, all kinds of problems. Grasses that are growing in there that I'll plug in the system, so they got even a bigger problem. So it's just, they're not, the way people go about things is in such a short-term manner. It's sad. And in 2015, people may or may not know, but in Shasta Lake, and one of the main tributaries in Shasta Lake turned blood red. And it came all the way out into Bridge Bay Resort, and to where there was a warning, don't swim in it because it could kill you. And there's aerial photographs that were taken, but it really didn't hit mainstream media. Now, that's one of the largest watersheds in the Northern California Central Valley.
I remember that. I was told that was algae.
Yeah, well, where'd it come from? That was a question I asked and asked and asked, and I could not even get in to take a sample of it to try to take it to the independent laboratory. So that was something that was guarded, and they shut off that whole area of the lake. You couldn't get in by boat. You couldn't get in by land that I was aware of. And if that was red algae, from what I understand, red algae only grows in brackish water. But my science could be wrong on that. Cross-reference it. So brackish water is where salt water and fresh water meet together, from again my understanding.
So what do you think it was then?
I don't know. That's just it. I don't know.
Was it thick? Was it like a blood red color? What?
Yeah, it was. From the aerial photographs that I was able to view, it just looked like someone opened up a slaughterhouse up in the Pit River and just started, slaughtering the animals, kind of like they did up in Wairika. Plugged up all those waterways up there. They shut down a sawmill up there, turned it into a slaughterhouse, and started dumping all the blood right down the drain into the Sacramento River. And that's an untold story. And people, people drink out of Sacramento River, and this is untreated water.
I can top that. The Russian River was where all the effluents around Santa Rosa here got dumped into along the Russian River until 2011, where up in the Geyserville, the wet surface air coolers that do all the water vaporization machines to modify and control weather and make it rain and everything, they put a pipe 30 miles from Sonoma County and Lake County using our waste into the water vaporization machines to pump them up in the air to create rain. So we're literally being shit on with our own shit.
That's not surprising. If you look at the agriculture system, and that kind of correlates with one of the devices I worked on, and a gentleman that runs a really large hog farm towards Mississippi. Him and I were working on a project together, and he actually is in charge of, he calls it, he's a shit pumper. But what they do is they take all that feces of the animals, and which is by the hundreds of tons by the week. It's a massive scale, and they spread it, and then they add water to it, and they literally spray it across the entire food crops. And people have no idea.
Oh, and they take our effluents and use them in the fertilizers. They take it in the it's just amazing how it all goes. But let's get back to what we were talking about. So how does they instigate you were saying that these nanobots, these swarming nanobots and these fire embers, they get activated, but all of us carry nanobots in us, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
And so they can incinerate anybody they want or any building they want, because we're all basically IP addresses, and they can locate us, and they can take out a building here or they can take out a person there. As I said, there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And it's actually, you can DNA target with that too, RNA target. So, and you can, ironically enough, you can do that under any stasis you want, and that's what I am only hypothesizing at this particular point with the so I can't state for a fact, I've never been part of the project, but the Human Genome Project. But I do know for a fact that there has been viruses that have been manufactured specifically to attack specific people with a genetic trait.
I've done a whole thing on that. The SARS attacked the Asians. The AIDS virus attacked the gays. I call it designer viruses. And they gave $40 million or $40 billion to Fort Detrick Bioweapons Lab after they were the ones that had the particulate matter anthrax of trillion particulate created at the Sandy Dugaway proving grounds in Utah, and they were in Detrick, and they blame it on not Bruce Ivans, the other guy, and he OD'd on Tylenol to cover it all up when it was found that it wasn't the Arabs, that sent the letters and shit. It was the U.S. military, folks. Wake up.
Yeah, and you got to understand, it's not necessarily the U.S. military. It's literally a group of very, very small people that are. You got to understand that these people have an absolute will to just want to control an absolute secret. And so even though the military complex is a very real thing, they're puppets in the game as well. So, and that's what I started learning as I was doing the manufacturing, that a lot of this tech wasn't going to the military complex. I'm not saying that they're the best guys, but they're not the worst guys neither on the board.
No, they're compartmentalized too. But the point I brought up was that people think the military are here to protect us. But they're, like you said, the reason they call them soldiers is they're sold to die. That's why they give them dog tags. But the think tanks we were talking about, the Tavistock, let's name the name, Stanford Research Institute, Tavistock Circle Committee of 300. Those are even the puppets for higher ups from that you're referring to. And then we can get into individuals and religions from there. So there's layers upon layers. But if we can convince the military that these stuff, like the military, a lot of people already know that they're not treated well, they're not cared for well, they're just dogs. Once they wake up, we might have a chance to right this ship. But so getting back to this technology, so what I want to read you this part about programmable matter one more. Far more serious is the possibility that large scale and convenient manufacturing capacity could be used to make incredibly powerful, non-replicating weapons in unprecedented quantity. This could lead to an unstable arms race. If a soldier in battle can reach into a paint can and pull out a hammer, why couldn't they pull out something more devastating? An obsession with obsolete science fiction images of swarms of replicating nanobugs has diverted attention from the real issues raised by the coming revolution in molecular nanotechnologies. We need to focus on the issues, how to deal with these powerful new capabilities in a competitive world. But this is already done. They're already using it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of quote. I'm going to quote Elon Musk, and he stated, "If you can't beat them, join them." So you can't necessarily look for just anyone in high power to kind of
save us,
solve this issue.
Save us.
Yeah,
everybody wants to be saved, and it's not going to be saved unless you and I and others speak out. It's the only way it's going to happen.
Correct, and that is really the only way. And obviously, keeping that there is good. There is a different force that's out there that is good. And I do believe that not everyone. I believe a lot of the soldiers that go into the military or armed forces, they recruit them young for intentional purposes, and they don't do it necessarily because they want to go do what they're forced to do. And the ones that rise to power are not necessarily the devious evil ones.
They're just friends. Yeah. But the science. If you're in science class in high school and you top of your class and you go to the National Science Fair and you get top of your class, you're going to be visited by Navy intelligence when you're 13 or 14 or 10, whatever.
So that's kind of how I got into this. Is I was approached while I was going through these projects, and So, like I said in the beginning, that you don't seek these out to a degree. You do because out of curiosity. But eventually, this finds you. And it finds you by people basically tracking what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then they seek you out in whatever way is necessary by either saying, you might want to apply for this job, or you might want to look into this direction, and out of your curiosity, you're led down that rabbit hole. And so it is a very back way of recruitment in a certain way.
And you don't even know you're being played until you're so far sucked in you can't get out.
That is correct, and it comes to a point where you make a moral decision, and you just have to make that moral decision. And as I have children and a grandson now, you really start to think, what can one person do? And the only thing to do is to be and to keep speaking out. And I commend you for what you're doing. And that's why if you go through some of your or other people's posts that did make this out, you will see on their videos, after having this bit of knowledge and what you've researched, it'll be so obvious that it's just irrefutable.
Well, you said that to me. You said you don't know what you're looking at. And when you said that to me the other day when we were talking, I went back and looked at the videos, and I looked at the Embers, and I go, look at them dance, look at them organize. I see it. But I didn't see it before because it was out of context, right? I didn't know what I was looking for.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you can't see the forest through the trees.
Right.
And because you're focused on one narrative. And that's why I was saying that this is more than one facet, and they come at you at multiple angles, so that way they try to get you to focus on one thing. Because if you're focused on a specific dot, you're not going to see all the other dots, and then you can't connect them. So the more dangerous part of this is that this technology that's been let loose that could either has a huge potential for the human race in all. And there's other countries that are very concerned about this as well and are doing massive studies on it. And they will openly admit in their scientific communities that this is 100% infection rate, if you want to look at it that way, as a virus. But it's just a man-made
the nanoscientists, concerned scientists for nanoparticulates, they have an organization that tries to understand and help give some type of morals. But as I worked for Wall Street in 20 years, and so there's no morals in Wall Street, folks. I guarantee you, they have no ethics, they have no morals, they have no values. It's all shareholder value. But what I want go ahead.
That's greed and monetary system that is that'll. It's just not. I can't say it's the monetary system that's the problem. It's the greed that follows the monetary system.
And the power they get from the monetary system, where they put out a piece of paper and say this is worth so much, and now they're going to crypto, and they control the lives of everyone that's just beholden to the same system. But let me ask you, Angel, 9/11, what are your thoughts on how they took that? I know they found thermite. We know it was justified. Directed energy weapons is what we're saying. That's something. There was a storm off the coast, geoengineering, and I want to talk to you about geoengineering a little later. But a storm was off the coast, Hurricane Aaron, and they used this energy field. And I want to talk about oxygen, energy fields, and vibrational electronic magnetic waves, and how they all can come together to make this force.
Okay. Well, what do you want to know? What
do you think happened to 9/11?
just put it right out there, don't you? It's sad. I don't even know why I laughed. It's almost like you try to put your head around it. It's sad. A lot of people don't realize that the 9/11 incident, well, obviously was a false flag attack, just like Guantanamo. Not Guantanamo, I think it was called Tonkin, but there's suburbs and other false flags to get people to do what they what they think is right. But to get right down to it, it was definitely a controlled demolition, and what facets of demolition they used, some were very obvious, some were not obvious, but a lot of people don't understand that there's a railroad or railway that runs underneath those buildings, and they were one of the largest gold depositories. Right. And that those were emptied just before the attacks. Now, that there in its own right, that they took the riches out of the building and left the souls standing to be destroyed, tell you everything.
And the reason they did the attacks on 9/11 before, when they blamed the Arabs and whatnot, that was to reinforce the gold down there, because they were going to do 9/11 later, and they wanted to reinforce, because it's like a bathtub under there because they're under the water. So they reinforced all that area to protect all the gold reserves.
Yeah, so with that, I mean, just even argue the fact that wasn't an inside job. First of all, you got NORAD, right? And even though NORAD this year followed Chris Santa Claus around the skies, which I think is just an absolute joke of technology and the abuse of it, of being able to show that they can, put whatever signal they want up there and people believe it. There's triple redundancy systems to actually stop something like this from happening, not only in the aircraft, specifically because they have, a flight ceiling, they have a flight plan, and as soon as they deviate from that, not only that, we have jets that are ready to be scrambled to dispatch and remove that threat. So there's so many facets of that scenario not even truly happening in reality, unless it is orchestrated and as a matter of fact, the jets were told to stand down, and
they flew them out. They had an operation going, a false flag operation going. It's all ridiculous. But how did they take 105 floors in 10.3 seconds down to the ground? When I used to go to dinner at the City of the World at the top of the World Trade Center, and the guys were telling me how the insides were, the steel was reinforced for the elevators, and all the superstructure was all reinforced in the center. And so they had to use, it came down even, but you have different beams at different tensile strengths that had to be taken down in equal dimensions. I couldn't understand why the center tower didn't go down later than the outside of it.
Well, are you familiar with the way how that building was constructed? You have to be familiar with the way that building was constructed. It was built from the outside in, so it was a skin, basically. And then it had the columns that ran up the center, which gave it the most amount of floor space possible. If you ask me, probably one of the best feats in engineering for a skyscraper that I personally have seen as a constructor or builder in the industry of looking at engineering, if that's what you want to call it. They basically just replicated parts of nature and said this works. So the way they had to have taken it down was a multiple faceted way. Again, you just can't attack something of that magnitude in one way and make it work. So the temperatures it would have took to cut through those I-beams, which I don't think people understand how thick those beams were. And there are photographs of them, and if you put them to scale, they're bigger than a 6-foot person. They're 8-9 inches thick in some of the narrowest parts. So the temperatures that would have had to make those diagonal cuts, more likely in thermite alone, I don't think would have done it. So that probably could have been the beginning stages of how do we use these nanothermite devices.
That could have weakened the superstructure on the outside when you saw those little puff explosions going out.
Absolutely. There was first-hand testimony of firefighters that were, I think one of the firefighters had his legs broken from the basement. He was on the ground floor, and the explosion from the basement, even where it shot him up into the ceiling. But and I wasn't there, but I did work with scientists that were there to do the very first investigation of how did this happen, And the reports that came back were unsatisfactory to the point to where they were basically fired from the job because they told the truth. And the truth was that this was a man demolition, and there was technology involved in this that had nothing to do with jet fuel. If jet fuel could burn stainless steel and those cold rolled steel and even hot rolled steel beams, then it would incinerate a jet engine. It would self-destruct every flight. So, I mean, that's just common sense.
I mean, the nose cone alone, I mean, the whole stupidity of it. We have so much pictures that it was just a hologram and nothing ever hit the building. But what we see the dustification, and that's the term Judy Woods used, and it's very interesting. This woman has not commented about these attacks. In fact, when I commented, she called me stupid, and she's not spoken about this since. But what took the steel beams and caused that big plume that just exploded from the top and out? It had to be some type of compression, like you said, demolition. But what takes that up and out like that? It has to be some type of what?
Well, you you get into a little bit of chemistry, and actually it's all chemistry. So you got your metallurgy, and then you have your atmospheric pressures, and then you got to understand that part of it, and then you have to understand that the temperatures that are being created at such a fast pace creates a vacuum. And it's that vacuum then is what makes the plume, and the plume color is the telltale. The color of that, if you look at the color of that versus the fires that are happening, it's the same color. And there's a reason for that, because it's the same materials that are being used and the same technologies that are being used. That very distinct gray plume of smoke that just hovers and continues to build and build and build is the same technology that was used then. And if you ask me personally, this is just my opinion, I think that was kind of like a trial, no different than the federal building. But I think that, quite honestly, was they intended for that building to go completely down, and it didn't. So, but
you're talking about World Trade Center 7?
No. I'm talking about the Oklahoma bombing.
Oh, the Oklahoma bombing back in 95. My brother died that day too, April 19th, 1995. So you're saying they meant to bring the whole thing down, but it didn't. It did only took down half of it.
That is correct, and that, I don't want to get too far into the political aspect of it, because the players on the board are pretty. I mean, basically, this conversation alone is well, I can't. It's dangerous.
Well, don't. We don't need to go there. I don't want to go politics. I want to go into technology. I want to understand better about the vacuum that's being created. Now, what's hurt in your understanding, because I'm learning more and more about how they have to create basically like a Faraday cage, a vacuum, like you're saying, they have to build these big vacuum labs in order to make these microbots and swarm bot fire embers and all this self-replicating little micro machines. But did they create an energy vacuum over 9/11 with Hurricane Aaron? Is that how they created the vacuum?
You know, that's an interesting thing, because I can't answer that yes or no. I wasn't boots on the ground, but the people that I have firsthand knowledge with, they were boots on the ground, and they would have a lot more extensive knowledge of the detail, and they were professing and running high-end R&D development as far as these kinds of devices at the time, and that's why they were sent out. First of all, how could this have happened? And after that, they came back with their answers, and then they were let go from their universities and different employment, because they went public. They had a moral choice. And now, as far as all of that, I can't say I know it all. I don't. But there were people had witnessed, and I believe I seen a clip where an aircraft was over the top of that building. I think the first building that was hit. Either the first or the second, but there were an aircraft that was witnessed to be seen by multiple viewers. And I do believe I watched that clip.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, I saw that. That's a known, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to be vague, but at the same time, I'm I don't want to speculate. Speculating is just going down, hypothesizing and thinking and just trying to throw stuff out there. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate to the best of my knowledge. So, if you ask me, I'm going off the evidence that I can look at for 9/11. I wasn't investigating that. I wasn't put in anywhere near that, but I did have firsthand communications with the people, the very first people, not the official report, but the very first report that came out, and that was not made public. It became public, and I'm not sure if YouTube took it down or not, but I'm not even sure if the gentleman will want me to say his name, so I'm going to leave that out for now. But if I can, I will get in contact with him, and I can see if I can give you his contact information.
Cool.
I'll make sure that's okay. And he was the lead investigator of that on the 9/11 Commission, of the very first investigation. And you'll be surprised of what you hear of that. And he works in the same kind of tech as I did as well.
And he was fired. I know who you're talking about. He was fired.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking. I know who you're talking. It's public knowledge, but talk about, like you were talking about, the people that are in Paradise, and your wife. She lived in Paradise, or she worked there.
Yeah, she worked there, and as a matter of fact, we were looking at purchasing some property up there just before this all kind of went down, ironically. And so it's and every time she would come home, she would just say how beautiful it is, and literally paradise is paradise. And I've been there as a younger man, and I've always enjoyed that area. It's kind of a semi-untouched environment for quite a while now, and it kind of would show you what the earth could look like, and if tended to properly. So
interesting you say that, because if you're going to pick a place and you're the elite, would they pick that place? The answer is yes.
Well, so the parallel to that is during the neo-Nazi regime, they did the exact same thing in Upper France, and they picked out this, basically their own private resort. And they have maps of it. There's maps
I think it's Berchtesgaden, wasn't it? Wasn't that Himmler's site? We had all the cult up there and stuff. Berchtesgaden. That's one of the places.
That is one of the places, but there's stuff in that area, and they were actually going to reverse engineer the genealogy of the original wildlife that was there, and then use that as their private hunting grounds and club.
So they were cloning back then, you're saying?
Absolutely, 100%. Cloning is so outdated and old. It's not even worth talking about, to be honest with you. That's just fact.
Just on a sidebar, so people understand, in Sausalito, California here, they had a company called Sausalito Savings and Clone in 2001 that for $40,000 you could clone your cat. Commercial, folks. So cloning is really, really old technology, and look at our food to do that. But so your wife is a registered nurse, is that correct?
Yeah. I don't want to get too far into my wife's.
No. Just to set a background, but that she understood. I mean, all of these things going on. But when you started looking, you were telling me you were looking at my material I was publishing from the Santa Rosa fires, and you were saying to me, you're surrounding it, but you're not getting to the core of how this all went down. And one of the things you brought up was the oxygen. And one of the things we're seeing around here is we're having less and less oxygen. More kids are getting heart attacks. And then a lot of people in Paradise, what I was getting to earlier was a lot of people in Paradise were making comments. It felt like the air was being sucked out. I heard that like 6-7 times now.
Yeah, it's being replaced with ozone. And if you look on air pollutant, which it's harder and harder to find because you got to really go to private sectors now to get a true air quality control. And which if you used to be able to go just to the standard weather channel and you can get all your air pollutants for your local areas. And the number one air pollutant, even on the most contaminated day, regardless if it was an actual true natural fire or any particulate matter in the air, the number one damaging gas in the air was ozone. Now, that's an interesting fact because ozone naturally doesn't occur in the atmosphere until up to 30,000 feet, give or take. So the fact that you see it down at close to sea level and up to around 10,000 feet in the air, that is, an ozone is O3 on the periodic table of contents, and it's extremely corrosive, and it just loves to eat everything up, including organic matter. So it just deteriorates your lungs, it deteriorates your glands, and it's a carcinogen of epic proportion. They use it in water treatment for destroying organic matter. And when you breathe it, you're doing exactly that. You're breathing something that destroys organic matter. Well, we're making organic matter, and our lung tissue is extremely susceptible to that.
And the ozone is generally 9 to 18 miles up above us. So they're using the geoengineering and all this chemtrails and all these new, I'm calling Chinese chem plastic over Chico and over Paradise. When I went up there last week, there was a layer that it was just like this fog. It didn't smell like fog. It didn't come in from the coast, nothing like it. But it was a chem. I called it the China chem plastic because it was just this layer about 900 feet that totally engulfed all of Chico, all the way down to Oroville, all the way up to Paradise. Then when I went up above Paradise on 70, up to Polga, it was all clear, and you could clearly see that this layer was just laying down, and Paradise was covered. So they could use thermal imaging. They could be doing whatever they want behind this cloak. And we're seeing the same thing down here in Santa Rosa. I mean, what happened after that? When that quote-unquote fire in Paradise started, what was that they put over Northern California that resulted in that huge plume that went west? What kind of winds ever blow east to west in Northern California? But what was that they put over us, sir?
You know, that's a lot of speculation on my part, if I were to speculate. But it would basically be an accumulation of ash and the nanoparticulate leftovers. Obviously, the studies they've done on the chemtrails, the incendiary device or the explosion in the satellite coverage which I cannot believe is not been covered. That whatever that was, it definitely set the pace for everything else. So that's the source, if you ask me.
Right,
and
that was Mike Morales on YouTube who showed that explosion is the right word. It exploded straight up, and I was comparing the shadow of it to Lake Tahoe, which is 22 miles by 11 miles, and that thing had to be 20 miles.
Right, and that's simple arithmetic, and that's triangulating. So, and you just basically, that anyone that knows anything about trigonometry or even topography or any kind of surveying or anything, that's an easy arithmetic to run, and you can get the distance of the shadow, the height of the projectile, the width of it, and get all the information you want out of it, and then be able to report that, because I think that's a significant point that's been left out, and the fact that plume was not only the ignition source, but the direction it went was in the opposite direction of the winds that typically don't run in that direction to begin with. So, and if you look on the satellite video of that, fortunately, I'm really, really glad that particular person recorded that, because that I can no longer find that in the archives. Which I tried to go back, and I did send you a few pictures of some HARP bursts and radio frequency bursts that are being still to this hour being put off in Chico right now, and they're concentrating at the radar facility at the airport right now. I'm not sure if you got those or not.
No, I did see those. Yeah, those were just. It's just like from center core from the NexRad or whatever the device is they're using there at the Chico Airport. It's emanating just in a full circle of lines just spread out. You could see the radiation, the RF frequency lines just exploding in all directions.
Right. Yeah, so they didn't have time to blurt that out yet. That lasted for about 10 minutes. And I just looked it up again the other day, and they're still doing blurps of that. So that's again part of the transmission that's still continuing, and which is also part of the same problem. So it's multiple faceted, but back to the dust. If you ask me, I didn't do a chemical analysis on it. No one's done a chemical analysis on it. From my understanding, anyone could have just taken a scoop of something anywhere or grab an air sample and take it to an independent lab and hopefully get an accurate of what's in this kind of layman's terms. What is this? And hopefully you get an accurate measurement of what's in there.
One of the things you said, which I wanted to ask you about, is you said it might be an ash that was combined, but if we didn't really have any forests that fire, the ash, I mean, the homes that were torched, the cars that were flipped, they're not going to put ash in the air, right?
No, they wouldn't, and that is correct. So, and that's another red flag. So you have basically a flashing point that's occurring, and the majority of those homes have metal roofs. If I'm seeing what I'm seeing correctly. And I did notice that the tin on the roofs wasn't incinerated, but everything else was. And that's a telltale sign. So that's something burning from the inside out, and at a flashing point. And a flashing point is when something basically just flashes not to a fire, but into nothing. It changes its molecular structure into something else, and that's a common way of how they get rid of a lot of toxic chemicals and toxic gases that are created by industry. They'll use pressure or a vacuum, and then it superheat it, and then it changes the molecular structure of it into a less harmful substance. And that's why you didn't see a lot of that what you would consider a traditional home fire smoke, that black, like tire burning smoke. You just seen a gray ash, and that's because of the temperatures that they were burning at, which is an extremely unnatural temperature.
So was there lasers used? Did they use lasers?
I would say definitely that there was, especially if you look at the heat signatures of the way how they bounced around on the satellite imaging, and you want to go to something that you can actually visibly record and then, see. And that you can. And you can see the hot spots when they occur, the timestamps when they occur, and where they occur at. And if you then overlay that with a map, you're going to get that those spots are indicative to your burn spots. They're going to be exactly where it is. Not necessarily exactly real close. The ground that burns, obviously they've been dropping this chemtrail, or that's very generic for what it is, but they've been doing the aerosol spraying of different facets of chemicals and different layers. And I do believe a lot of that is the nanotechnology, and that's why that fire can start and stop in certain spots and burn and to have those straight lines. So that could be controlled by the on-off switch of the laser. It could be set free, and that's why it destroys or said, hey, I guess in the layman's terms, to go, I want it to burn glass and everything in this particular
they can set the temperature anomalies to what they want. Burn steel, burn glass, burn iron, leave this alone. I mean, we see plastic garbage cans that weren't even touched.
Yeah, because that's so the chemical makeup of that. So that's, again, you're looking at something different. Now, if you look at the glass is shattered. It's gone.
Right.
And tempered glass, when it heats up, it shatters. That's what it's intended to do. It's safety glass, but it's gone. And so that means it flashed over. So you're talking extreme temperatures, and you can look up that information of what all the flashing points are. What's the flashing point of mixed metallurgy of automobiles, and it's very ironic of how the glass would incinerate, and some cars were only partially incinerated, and unfortunately it looks like the occupants in them. But because I can't imagine if something happening that fast, and I've done flashpoint experiments in my laboratory, and when it flashes over, it's instantaneously. It's within a blink of an eye.
So it combusts. So, I mean, that's the question I had. Is like a wood fire builds combustible material as it gains heat, it makes its own convection, and then the heat gets to a maximum temperature. But you're saying these things using this type of technology combust where they can take a steel beam at 3,000 degrees and they can instantly dustify it? Instantly.
Yeah. And if it's not the forest fire, so wood doesn't burn. Wood heats up to, no, it's not the wood that burns, it's the gassing of the burn, or the wood that burns, the gassing off, off-gassing, I should say. And so you don't have off-gassing in steel. So you have to have a continuous combustible of something of a higher temperature than what the steel is in order to get it to melt. And even in a kiln, any blacksmith would know this, that the temperatures, just to do a simple weld, you're talking, 2,700 degrees on a low temperature to up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So, and that's just to get it to a yellow hot. And the different color spectrum that it's emitting, a light spectrum, will give you the indication of the temperature roughly about. And a blacksmith or a metallurgist will just kind of get the feel of that and sense of that and the kind of sparks that it lets off. So to get that to flash over, you're talking extreme temperatures. To have metal disappear or turn into dust, there has to be more than the obvious, or than what's able to be seen with the naked eye, and that's what the incendiary devices of the nanoparticulate.
So I'm reading these articles too. I mean, we had back in, people were telling me in Paradise, and I read an article from January 2018, I think it was January 18th, about white powder being on all the cars. And then the tow truck driver told me that when he went in there on Sunday, the fire started on Thursday. He was brought in escorted in into Paradise on Sunday. He noticed white powder over all the trees. And what I'm reading here, and this is from researchgate.net, characterization and microwave absorbing of NDFETI intermetallic compounds. And they're talking about intermetallic compounds of magnetic scrap powders. And these powders showed good microwave absorption. They were alloy ingots were ground into fine powders. So is this what we're seeing as the ignition switch, these powders?
Yeah, I mean, you would see it as a powder. It doesn't mean it is a powder.
Right. Because they can self-assemble. They can make themselves into anything they want, right?
In essence, yeah. Yeah, and it depended on their programming.
And how many nanobots are there in let's say, how many nanobots can there be on a person or in a house?
Oh, geez. So so I should have this in front of me. Because I believe on the nano scale, I think there is like the tip of a pen, like a needle. You could put 10,000 and 10,000 of them on the tip of a pen, and to make it actually something. So you're just talking. I mean, you're talking a number that is so large. It's very difficult for people to understand. And when people think of small things, they think, okay, you can barely see it. Okay, so the human hair, like I was explaining, is roughly 5 to 7 thousandths of an inch thick. And for most people, that's an extremely small object, what they would consider a forensic item, something that takes a microscope or something to compare it to. And that's actually an extremely large object in the nano world. I mean, that could be up to hundreds of thousands of nanobots to make that size. So independent of how they assemble. But now, if they're irradiating or self-destructing in this case, or creating an incendiary aspect, the glow of the ball or the glow of the object would be larger than what the actual object is. But it's a very difficult concept to get your head around how many nanobots there really are.
So how do they control? I mean, if everything's related then through an RFID frequency, it's got to relay and be relayed to with a two-way switch, the on-off switches. How much? I mean, there has to be that many frequencies as well.
Well, and that's my question of why are they still broadcasting the RF frequencies from the radar station in Chico right now? You know, are they keeping those bots at bay? Is that the off signal? Interesting thought.
Yeah,
I mean, because that's the first time in all these fires I continuously see and you can plot where the disclosed radar systems are, and then the undisclosed ones, which are the military complex ones. So, that you just got to ask. You start asking the questions. Once you understand the basis of it, it's really hard to, unless you really start breaking it down and go into, the whole science of it, which I think is very laborious and tedious, but you can. But it's really, once you get the concept of it, then you just start putting the dots together. And because you don't need to know every bit about the one thing, you just need to be able to see the signatures.
Right, and then down the road from you guys, and down the road from Paradise, maybe 30 miles as the crow flies, is Beale Air Force Base with their PAVE-PAWS, which is Precision Acquisition Vehicle Entry Phased Array Warning System that they've had since the Cold War. And these things can be tuned to any frequencies, and this thing is massive. These PAVE-PAWS are massive. They're in Massachusetts, Florida, Texas, and California, right down the road from Paradise. So they can use these RF frequencies with massive power and massive abilities to frequency modulate billions and trillions of frequencies. This is what I try and get people to really understand: is if they can find you flying in a plane at 30,000 feet, traveling at 500 miles an hour, and get a frequency so you can upload and download your YouTubes. What do you think the military's been able to do for 50 years?
Right. And your key words were to get people to understand that magnitude and that capability, because most people, even when I talk with people that don't understand what I do, even as a hobby, and I still build things at extreme precision levels just for my own personal purposes and for friends of mine, I'll hold a plus or minus tolerance of 1 or 2, 10 thousandths, and people are like, well, what is that? And that still is such a large number to the number we're talking on a nano scale. And then when I try to show them on something as simple as a micrometer, it blows their mind. That you can't even get light to. You can, but the naked eye won't even pick up light through that measurement. At least your eye won't be able to pick it up. So when you start talking about these large numbers, I think that could easily put the fog over people's eyes, and then they start to shut down. And you got to kind of break it down into something that's more relatable, so they understand the scope of it.
Do you want to talk about your devices you're making? Do you feel comfortable talking about it? We can do it another time if you want, but let's just stay on this subject because it's such a big subject. But Angel, one of the reasons he has to be careful is because he's come up with, as well as many other people, abilities that we could have and solve and have peace on Earth. And he's dealing with energy. He's come out with his own devices that can help and heal. And we'll get into it another time. But I want the reason I got in touch with him was because he reached out to me and said, I have a trailer and I want to help the people because I feel for them down there. And you have a very dear friend who we don't want to name who was working in the Red Cross. Do you want to tell the story about what they found on the Red Cross? You don't have to if you don't. We got enough evidence, but if you want to, but your friend's story is really powerful.
Yes, well, I kind of don't want to touch bases. I mean, if you don't mind, I don't want that because too many ties come back around.
Okay, but I'll relate what you were saying to me then, is that just like we personally observed, just like I observed, the Red Cross is not your friend. They're not here to help, and they're not helping anybody. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. I can keep it as vague as that. Yeah, so that was firsthand experience with that, and so during the attack in Northern California, that was a firsthand experience of a local community group getting together and has been and still is active in helping people that are either displaced, homeless for one reason or another, or just don't have medical coverage because human services don't really apply to them. For some reason, our society shuns the humans that don't, or people who don't have the nice car, the nice clothes, or don't have the look. And some people have serious addictions that they don't know how to handle or don't have the coping mechanisms. So the group of people that go around and help has been helping our community for over 30 years, 40 years now. Went to help with the disaster relief and at a local public environment, and was barricaded away and could not even enter the premises until they were able to locate the owner of the property. Excuse me. And it's kind of upsetting because they went there with medical supplies. They went there with doctors and nurses and clothing and food and you see and I'm going to use it. Guy Ferrari, the wannabe chef, had his big trailer out there and posting and parading around like this was some TV show, and the Red Cross and their tents up, and they wouldn't allow any medical or any other relief into their so-called environment.
Is the Red Cross not allowing local community organized help and assistance that have been in organizations for decades? They came at the biggest disaster in the history of your area, tried to help. The Red Cross was already established and would not let them in.
Excuses, blatant statement. It got into a pissing match. And because we didn't back down. And they had no choice because it is, we got permission from the people who own the property to be there. And you're right. We have, this entity has been and still is helping the community on a regular basis. And through the tenacity and perseverance of not only the people, the doctors and the professionals and the administration of our local community, said that we're not leaving, and Red Cross, you are not going to kick us out, because they were literally putting barricades up and would not let any of us in. And they put barricades across every entry, and it was quite eye-opening, because it's not something that I know you always hear stories, and until you start firsthand dealing with that, you really realize it's all a farce. It's all a show, and they put on TV, the guy Ferrari helping the people, and ended up turning out that he only cooked for the people that were in the Red Cross and a few other volunteers, and they didn't even help our local community volunteers.
Yeah, and we went to the Butte County fairgrounds, and I went to the Red Cross, and we had clothes and food. First, we went to the FEMA camp. I don't know if you know, there's a huge, massive FEMA camp, like 50 acres next to the Chico Airport, that was there before November 8th. The Red Cross guard who we were talking to at this Butte County fairgrounds said he had been at another place that had about 300 people, and there was about 90 people place he was at, including the Nova virus, which was another microwave weaponry. It wasn't the virus. They induced it into people. But they were bugging out. They were shutting down. But he said he was there on November 8th from Georgia. I said, excuse me, November 8th, you were here when the fire started? He says, yes. We were actually here a couple days before, and then Deborah Tavares talked to the National Guard at the FEMA camp, and they said they were stationed there well before. And then PG&E, we've got up and below Paradise, was there weeks before. So we have all this evidence that this was a planned, staged attack, not a fire, but an attack on the people in this country and on the citizens that are helpless and clueless to be able to mitigate. And now we're trying to help people, find people, and we're having a hard time locating those that got out. And I hate to ask you this, but someone who, we talked about a little bit earlier, I mean, out of 52,000 people, which is their official number, how many do you think got out?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The only thing I can tell you this is that during the controlled fires that were up here in Northern California, my father was in the evacuation zone, and I immediately got him on the phone and said, hey, Dad, you're in the evacuation zone. Do you realize that? And he said, no, I didn't. And I'm like, well, how do you not know that? It should be on the news or some sort of emergency broadcasting system or anything. Apparently, Northern California opted out for that. Now, I don't remember ever opting out for that, but ever since I've ever known in this area, we have an emergency broadcast system that goes off every 4 or 5 months, and it can be quite annoying. But it
didn't go off here in Santa Rosa. The FEMA guy decided that it was going to be too much of a panic to 6:15 in the morning to alert anybody, so they didn't. To a person inside Paradise, they said they were waiting for notification, and they told to stay put. They were told not to leave. The only places that told them to get the F out was Facebook. Facebook was the only thing that saved a bunch of lives. And having gas in your car. This is the other thing, people. Keep your frickin' gas tank. But didn't you go in to try and get your father out of there?
I did, and that's why I'm trying to bring this back full circle to the question of how many people do I think made it out of Paradise. So I went to physically go in and get my dad out because he didn't have the capabilities of getting himself out. And it was barricaded off with not only the local PD, which it looked like they had recruited some rather young people, and they definitely were not seasoned at all, probably half my age, and very wet behind the ears, and very...
Were they weaponized? Did they have weapons?
They were weaponized, and there was also some fatigued with the militarized vehicles with their weapons on top of them as well.
Machine guns.
And it looked just something like out of a movie, to be honest with you. And they had the barricade up, and I drove right up to the barricade, and they had immediately got their hands on their weapons, hadn't unholstered them yet, until I said, hey, my dad is behind, just a few blocks down. I need to go get him. And I'm like, I'm going to go get him. And they immediately said, one guy unholstered his weapon, and the other one clicked basically unlocked the weapon, his side firearm. And at that point, my wife and I felt rather in imminent danger. And I said, very, very clearly, if I can't go get my father, do you have a system or a way to go get people out of this evacuation zone? And with very clear, decisive words, he said, no, turn around and leave now. And that was with his firearm drawn and in his hand, not pointing at me, but with those tones, the words, and the backing of all the force that he had with him. They were not going to let me through to save my own father, almost like they wanted a casualty effect. And they were clear of making a point that they did not have a system in play to get those people out. There was probably 15,000 people in that area of the evacuation zone. And just that sliver of it, it was a very high populated area. It was a senior citizen area. The majority of the people in there don't have a way of getting out. And so I went in there with my big truck, and was just going to do what I could do to help anybody I could and get my dad and anyone who needed help. But they were having nothing of it. And that was our local government, our local county doing that.
How could a local county, knowing they live there, how could someone, are they under mind control? Are they under orders? Are they just like, they're just brain dead? I mean, if you live in a town and you're a sheriff or you're in the police force or you're what National Guard or whatever, and it's in your town, how could you let that happen?
I don't know. It was very disturbing for me to experience. Very confusing at first. It took me I went through a lot of emotions as I'm reversing, and a moral. Basically, at that point, as I'm reversing and turning around, I'm immediately calling my dad, saying, "You need to get out of there because no one's coming to get you, and they won't let me in to come help you. So find a way out." And he did, and he made his way to my house eventually. Okay. Unfortunately, the area he was in never, continued to get burned. But they had no intent. My point on this is they had no intent to let anyone in or out. Now, if that's the MO, in Reading, there's a lot of ways in, a lot of ways out, and they had almost all of them blocked off. I know the area very well, and there was no way I could have gotten to that area. And so there was a highly orchestrated event to barricade specific areas for no people in or people out, it seemed like. Unfortunately, my dad was able to drive right through the barricade because he's a stubborn old man, thankfully. And so he made, like I said, he made it out. Fortunately, the area he was in never got burnt, but I'm sure I can only imagine if that's the MO, that's the way they feel. And I say they loosely because I don't know who they are. I don't know if that was a true uniform or a costume.
Right.
How do you differentiate?
That's a good point. Did you recognize anybody? Because the tow truck driver who worked 30 years, 25 years in Chico and went up in Paradise, when he went in there, he didn't recognize any of the cops. The Chips, I mean, he knows all the California Highway Patrol guys. He knows them all because that's who calls him to tow stuff. He didn't recognize anybody. It was a militarized police from the get-go in Paradise. From the very beginning, it was militarized.
Yeah, and the police officers in this area, Northern California is not a very large area, so I think in the city itself is at maximum probably 80,000, maybe 90,000 people at maximum. And, you go grocery shopping on a regular basis, you see people, and you see them either in their uniform or out of their uniform. And it doesn't matter what facet of capacity, whether it be a judge or a marshal or a nurse or a doctor, you eventually run into them. So you get to know people eventually. And the gentleman that I had seen, like I said, I noted that they looked extremely young, probably in their early 20s. And they either called in as a reserve police officers with the backing of either National Guard or some sort of military presence. And like I said, they were adamant on not letting me in. So, and with force, I must say that they were with intent and force.
So if you had driven through that, you think you would have been shot and killed?
When someone draws a weapon, the way I see it, they intend to use it.
Right. They're trained. If you draw it, you use it. You don't. And you aim for that. You aim to kill. You don't aim to wound.
They call it the off button. Yeah. They call it the golden triangle. It's sick. But the golden triangle is in between right in the middle of the forehead and down to the cheekbones, and that is the off button.
To mean off them, basically kill them.
Oh, they say they're trained to if they can, that's the area they go for, and that's typical training. They openly, and I say they because I have family that's in law enforcement, and they go through the same training, and they know that is the off button, and there's that's the way to put a person down. Definitely, because a person can take sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shots and continue to be a threat. under their training guidelines.
Did you see, Angel? Did you see the picture of that was sent about the two Cal Fire guys on top of the Cal Fire truck with the 50 caliber sniper rifle?
You know, I did see that, and that is a very long range rifle.
1,800 meters.
Yeah, I did have a silencer on it too. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, if you look at the muzzle end, there's a I can't remember if you look up the brand. They call them a canister, but that's a silenced rifle. So you would not hear that. You would hear the sonic boom, but you would not hear, if you were far enough away, you would not hear where it came from.
So nobody got out of paradise. It didn't get out early.
If they were corralled up and told to stay somewhere, I would assume that they probably didn't, unfortunately.
We have testimony that they were huddled inside the Walmart till at least 5 o'clock that night. One guy did escape, but then he said the telephone poles collapsed behind him on Clark Road getting out of there. And I asked him, do you think anybody made it out? He goes, doubtful is the word he used. And then we have the tow truck driver saying when he went in there for the first time on Sunday, I said, how many dead did you see when you went in there? He said 200 easy. He said, but every street was backed up with cars lined up on the sides of one lane, like they were just sitting there. And they were just sitting there.
Here's what's interesting about that, and this is part of the telecommunications or satellite communication systems and the GPS systems and part of the stuff I worked on. That was another red flag for me because, you know, a lot of people don't realize, but vehicles have been being tracked since the early 90s. And if you drive a modern vehicle and you have your map up, it'll give you, you know, traffic jams and things like that. And this is how you tell. And a lot of people don't know that technology wasn't around. Well, yes, it was. It was around and active. You just weren't going to have the user interface of it. So it'll tell you if there's a traffic jam. If let's say you're going over to the coast on Highway 36 and there's 3 or 4 cars bunched up and you happen to get to them and none of them are newer vehicles. And it'll show you that there's X amount of cars in your way. But none of them, and they're all in the 90s era. And this happened to my wife and I going over, and I was like, see, look, because, I tried to explain to her these different, and this was, a couple of years ago, we were going that direction and during December. And so we kept the nav on specifically for, accidents and such. And quite a few of the vehicles that we've seen in these so-called traffic jams or backed up traffic were older model vehicles. So, and that's when it kind of opened her eyes. So I say to anybody out there, if you have a modern vehicle and you question any of this technology, try it. You'll see. And that's all I can say. Don't trust anybody for their word. Look it up. Do your own research, and you'll see the truth of it.
Yeah, and right before I spoke to you now, I had a call from someone who I'm going to air their interview next. He's a 25-year-old who worked at a acute care facility there in Paradise that was burned out. And he was talking about how he was seeing people that were in the cars had to get out of the cars and had to go on the streets because the cars became immovable or became too hot to be, I'm not sure which one it is, or both, but they had to get on the roads. And he says people, they abandoned their cars and just started walking. Yet we also have testimony from the tow truck driver saying he looked in and he saw fragments of bones. People were literally melted down into the springs of the seats and shit.
Yeah, that'd be your flashing point aspect, which is it's hard to hear, but that's horrible. I mean, it's just horrible.
It's genocide. There's no other word to use it, but just genocide.
It is genocide. It is genocide, and if you look at those vehicles, and I think I'm not sure if you uploaded it or a third party uploaded it, but the cars were all lined up, and if you look at them, it's mirror to mirror to mirror to mirror to mirror. It's in a straight exact line, and this is kind of what I was trying to get to with that. It's not just tracking that So LoJack, a lot of people are familiar with LoJack. In case your car gets stolen, they can turn it off, immobilize it, make it go at a certain speed, literally hit the brakes, literally turn your steering wheel. And that, to me, looked like a massive turn-off system and direction because nobody parks right behind people, especially during a disaster. If anything, it's create just exact chaos and people running into each other.
It wouldn't be over unless the only thing I could think of was that a cop told them, "Hey, pull over here, line up here," and someone was going down saying, "Wait till you can get down the hill." But what you're saying is they just commandeered the cars possibly and put them one behind the other, where the only option for people was to get out of their cars.
Absolutely, and that could be done with a simple command of a satellite GPS command, and the technology. And for people to realize the technology, they sell RC aircraft drones that have all this technology in them. So people go, well, that's not possible. No one would do that. Well, yeah, they would, and yeah, they could. So
yeah, they did, and it's just beyond the pale.
And look at the precision, and if you look at the precision of it, that's where they overplayed their hand. That's where they really kind of made it too obvious for someone who knows about the controllability, the tracking, the absolute precision that can take place. And it's literally like if you were to see a giant parking lot and you had, just a guided line, a laser lining up those cars, because those cars weren't like a little to the left, a little to the right. They were all pulled over in an exact line.
Row after row, street after street, honey run lane. And the question I always kept asking was, well, if there's one lane open, like if I'm in a fire and the fire's coming at me and there's a lane open, I don't care if it's one way or zero ways. I don't care if it's the wrong way. I'm getting the frick out of there. I'm going to drive in the other lane and get out of there.
Yeah, and a little bit of philosophy on that. And so it's very unnatural for us as a human species to want or to be able to let harm be inflicted on us. It's the natural reflex is to shy away from it.
Olympic brain, survive at all costs.
Yeah, the fight or flight kind of scenario, and whether you fight or whether you flight, you're still going to try to avert the damage. And it goes to the fact of there is actually a philosopher that goes on as far as trying to understand when people started, why were these people damaging themselves? Whether this is just something I kind of was curious about, and it didn't make any sense to me. All these youths growing up were, causing bodily damage to themselves, and that could be very well a part of this whole system and the programming of I know they use it, the MK Ultra slang out there quite a bit, but it really is. And that would make sense to that, of being able to override that ability to avoid harm. Right. In that emotional aspect, disconnecting that mind away from that. Because
you're definitely in flight or fight mode when you're in that mode. You're in survival, Olympic brain. You're going to get out and do whatever you have to do. I mean, but how did they? I mean, did you hear the comments that's been repeated by Cal Fire Chief Ken Pimlott that this fire moved at 80 football fields a minute?
Yeah, the only way that's possible is again you have the nanobot technology that I'm talking about, and FEMA put their own foot in their mouth by admitting it. So it's not even me saying it; it's them. That's why I was like, well, they just put their own foot in their mouth.
But here's the other foot in the mouth is that the campfire Polga is some 15 miles northeast of Paradise, right? It's up and above and to the right if you're looking at it from the West Coast. So they're saying it moved at 237 miles per hour. I interviewed guys up on 70 up at where the Cal Fire building didn't get hit, but the Roadhouse built-in stone cafe got torched. And these guys said it was such a slow-moving fire, they didn't get evacuated till the next day at 3:30 in the morning. Then the fire started on Thursday at 6:30 a.m., but he didn't get evacuated, and he's just 10 miles away from the origins until 3:30 in the morning the following day. Yet they're saying that it came through Paradise all day on Friday, and people were stuck in town and couldn't get out, and the fires were all around them. So how is this fire moving at 237 miles an hour? It moves so slow that this guy was saying for a whole day it hardly even moved. They could have put it out. He said they had 40, 50 trucks down the road 3 miles just parked there and were standing down. I have first-person testimony saying that they stood down on 70, and then his Roadhouse Cafe, which they had 2 fire trucks, and they said they were going to protect it. They didn't protect it, and it burned down. And then 3/4 of miles up the road on the right is the Cal Fire, and that wasn't touched. Wasn't touched.
Well, that kind of parallels what my experience in the car fire when they turned me around from trying to save people's lives.
We don't do body counts, General Frank said.
So, and that's me saying as a living witness, not a third party, second party. That's me as a living witness experiencing that, and that is disturbing.
It's all disturbing. This is beyond disturbing. This is how are we going to deal? So where do you see this going? I mean, I hate to speculate in this technology, and I don't want people to live in this fear because this is a great awakening.
Fear mongering. Yeah, no, fear mongering doesn't get you anywhere, and it really doesn't. Knowledge is power. It truly is, and that's why I stated that, don't take anyone's word for it. Do the research yourself. Take the time out of your day, if whoever's listening, take the time out of your day, even if it's 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. What is that? One sitcom show? It's nothing. So it's not even a lunch break for some people. You could look it up while you're eating on your lunch break. Everyone has these devices, which are extremely powerful research devices that are not utilized to their potential. They're entertainment, and they need to be used as a library and cross-reference everything. Don't just take one subject and take it for what it is, cross-reference it.
I say that all the time. I say, look at the 100 different ways at the fishbowl. Look at it from 20 different directions. Read 5 books that discourse opposite points of view, and use your discernment and your judgment. You can do it, folks. But go ahead.
Agreed.
And how are you functioning now? You've got. What are your thoughts on it? And now, do you want to get into your attack at all, and how? Because you and I were both psychotronically attacked, and what happened to you or not?
No, that's kind of a mute point in comparison to what we're talking about.
Right.
It really is.
But it started. Let's just say it started when you started to speak out.
It did. It did. Unfortunately, and this is their dirty little secret, is that it's so hard. Once the deed is done, it's so hard to trace it back to a definite. And they know it. So it's almost it's an invisible weapon for a reason, and it makes it untraceable.
Touchless torture, I call it. It's called touchless torture.
Yeah, and that's been around for a long time. I mean, and people don't realize that either. And I was having this debate with a highly educated person in the establishments of the school systems and universities, and he's like, this just really just can't be possible, and this, and I would only use that in overseas or in a military, kind of that way if it was possible. And I'm like, yeah, I said right there, I'm having it. I said right there. Right across from us is that weapon in a box, in a Faraday cage, and you put your food in there and heat it up every day, and you never question how it does it. Unleash that Faraday cage and see what it does to you.
Yeah. Do cell phones have microwave protection around them? Do Wi-Fi and Li-Fi have microwave protection around them? No. We're being exposed. I mean, we're just so stupid. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, it's not. I can't say that because it's a giant masquerade, and it's done in such a strategic way that it's so easy to fall into, and it really is. Unfortunately, I grew up in the era where there wasn't any cell phones, so I and more likely you grew up through that transition to where you used to have to call somebody, and an answer machine was a new thing.
Right.
An answering machine was something that if you showed up at someone's front door, there was a notepad on the door. It sounds silly, but this is true. And you wrote the note, said, "Hey, I showed up at your house. I'll come back at this time." And if you came back at that time and the note was still there, you knew the person wasn't home yet. And that was or you sent them a letter. And those are your two options. And when the answer machine came out, you could leave a message and you waited for the phone call back. And more likely you weren't home because you were out doing something creative and constructive. The TV wasn't a thing of a major thing for one. Most of the time when you wanted to watch something, you had to be there at that specific time and place. So they've slowly, which I call the boiling frog syndrome, they've slowly put this frog into water and have slowly keep turning up the heat to where eventually that frog doesn't know it's in boiling water. And that's where we are today.
And people don't understand that DARPA released the internet to the public in 1994-95. It was the military that was releasing the internet, just like the smartphone in 2003. It's meant to encage us and enslave us through very deceptive, like you're talking about. And this is why I got out of Wall Street, because I learned the deceptions. I learned the trickery. I asked questions about what would happen to the environment, what would happen to the people if we did this and planned this. And they said, "Well, how's your family?" I said, "What do you mean, how's my family?" And then I understood. They're a family there. And it only matters what happens in your family. We're here to enhance shareholder value. A corporation is a corporation that all these guys that are doing this, that have names and addresses, these people have names and addresses, and they hide behind these corporations. And so it becomes now, as we keep learning and growing while we can, to keep disseminating this news and bringing this truth to light. Because if we don't start waking up to what is happening now, where's our future, Angel? What happens next?
Well, that will left to be decided. That is the $1 million question, if you want to say it that way.
Are we more powerful? Are we more powerful spiritually than the machine?
I have hope. Yeah, I really do. And the path is narrow, and and the people who seek out the truth will be the people who break free from the soul catcher, and that ironically is a program that's out. And
Dr. Robert Duncan. Have you read that book, Soul Catcher, by him?
No, I haven't.
That's what it's called, Soul Catcher, and he worked on it.
I did not know that. So, the compartment, Class A compartmentizing. Back when one of the few projects I worked on, I shouldn't say few, one of the projects I worked on, a guy told me about the blue, and it haunted me for a long time, and that really, he just said, "Watch out for blue." It haunted me. I just kept rattling it around, and as time went on, the cell phones came out, and LEDs came out, and which were all once in R&D research facility that was being, and there's always a long-term goal. It's a chess game, and you just got to think 10, 20, 30 steps ahead. Why is this here? Why did they take an LED and make it different spectrums, even though behind that spectrum is the blue light? So if you are going to not say LEDs are bad, just realize that you can purchase LEDs that don't have the original blue light spectrum that gets emitted with a filter in front of it. So you just got to do your research. And do your research, know your products, know what you're doing, and cross-reference and question everything. I mean,
Well, and then the movie you bring up blue, and immediately I started doing this blue study about avatars and the movie Avatar and why they. What is that? Are you there?
Well, yeah, I am. I just heard something too. I don't know what that was.
But the avatar is in blue in the movie, and the blue relates to material appearance or incarnation of a deity on Earth. And so it all goes back to a much more deeper spiritual. There's mental, spiritual, and physical when you talk about the realms. So I always try and talk about each of the three realms and not saying, not doing a blanket over all. But the blue theme, the blue moon, all of these things have very esoteric meanings behind it as well. And this is a religious, spiritual war, folks. This isn't a physical war. It's mentally a war too. But we've got to find our higher purpose in life. And this is all focusing on how we can come together, how we can understand the technology that's taken over everybody's lives. And that right now is the time to act while we still have a window, or the future of humanity. I've been to the Georgia Guidestones. I actually flew to Georgia because I said, no way somebody did this. And I came away saying somebody had very serious intention. And the first thing on the Georgia Guidestone says the population needs to be kept at 500 million people, which is down from 7 billion. So do the math. So is this their silent weapons for quiet wars? Is this are they implementing it? Is this what's happening?
Well, that is interesting. That something like that would be allowed to even stand, and regardless if it's on private property or not. And then it's governmentally protected. So if you vandalize that, you're highly prosecuted. So that's a protected entity that is carved in stone. That's what I find very it just goes in line with a lot of things I've known and seen, and once living in the way northern California, up next to the Oregon border, up past Mount Shasta, which Mount Shasta is riddled with all kinds of caves and caverns and that go really, really deep.
Black Apache helicopters and the sex slave games of the most dangerous game, where they'd put the sex slave women like Kathy O'Brien and they would hunt them down like dogs while they're running around naked around Shasta. I mean, Shasta is a universal spiritual place.
Just get ready to hit on something very close to that, and at specific times during celestial moon cycles, that's something that I was made aware of, and there's a specific cave that overlooks the peaks in line with Black Butte. I think not Black Butte Mountain. It's I call it Cinder Mountain, but it's right there at the pass.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Right off of 5 there, yeah. Cinder Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's I'm trying not to do too many landmarks, so I disclose the location of this place. But anyhow, so yeah, the celestial marking, it glows in this cave, and these people stand around in these red velvet. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's true. They really do, and completely naked around this, and let the moonlight go in there, and they chant. And this is a real thing.
Wait. There's moonlight that goes down through a shaft into a cave, and then what's the red light? Naked people, red light?
They're in these red, like velvety, it's like a thick cloth costume. It looks like a freaking carnival costume, if you ask me. I find it's ridiculous, but it's their ceremony, and they'll have a ceremony, and I don't know all about the ceremony, but I do know enough about it that it's definitely it's a highly coveted, highly secret, and probably the first one to talk about it that I know of in that area. But the group of people that are part of it, some are in the water industry. And I'm not talking about the operators. I'm talking about the owners of these water industries. Sure. They own the water rights. They own the power, are part of the power companies. They're part of the. Without going any further, they're part of the major infrastructures of the land. And they group together and they hold these freakish ceremonies. And it just blew my mind. And I felt like this is the most ridiculous thing for people to do. And I never got to understand the full meaning of it, didn't care, didn't want anything more to do with it, and I'm like, I'm out, I'm gone, I'm out. You guys are freaks. And that is something apparently that is, after learning that, I started doing a little more research into that, and that's just a ranch-off community of a small fraction of this branch-off community that really controls all these infrastructures and plan things out. And after they do their thing, they have meetings, and it's kind of like the G2 community.
Right.
G6,
well, did you just stumble upon that, or how did you find that? Don't disclose what you don't want to, but
yeah, no, I'm not going to. I definitely don't want to. I'm almost a little embarrassed that I was even serious enough to go that far down that rabbit hole, but it was just almost it really was appalling. And so after that, you just kind of turn around and just, you got to make a moral decision. Where do you stand spiritually? Where do you stand morally? Where do you stand? And that's when I started to go more freelance and public information and disclosure. And I've actually gone quiet about everything since my incident. And it's been almost 6-7 years now. I kind of lose track. I kind of stopped keeping track of time. And I basically live, not day by day, but I live in the moment, in the now, because that's more real than anything.
I mean, just in closing, we're coming up on 2 hours, and that's the same way I feel. It's like all this has made my life more intense, more meaningful, more valuable, and my time is just now. I'm living in the moment right now. What can I do? What should I do? And not worrying about the future, what's happened in the past. But I find myself just more present. Does that make sense?
Present. That makes complete sense. And because the present is the future. So if you're present now, then whatever you're present with now is going to become the future. So I always tell my kids, and I preach to my kids as much as I can that way, that if you're present now, and not caught up in everything else, you can change the future. So you can literally will the future into existence by being present.
And Angel, you're present here to be with us. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark right here. This has been one of the most amazing conversations I've ever had, and I really want to thank you. Is there anything else you want to add before we close it up here?
Yeah, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the work that you do. And just continue down that path, and I appreciate anyone who's going to listen and take something from this. And just definitely do your research, cross-reference everything, question everything. Don't take anybody's word for fact. Look everything up. And
you become your own person. You own your own discernment and judgment. And then the other thing, too, is what the hopium I want to end with this with is we have all this evidence. Look up primarywater.org that there's massive amounts of original water, healthy water, just as low as 300 feet under the ground. And then also, like you deal and you've worked and you know extensively about free energy and Tesla technology. We have free energy. And we take free energy and we add free water and we bring it to everyone. And there's no more wars, folks. There's no more countries. There's no more fights. We can grow our own food anywhere. We can have free energy, travel anywhere we want. We've had this technology for 100 years. So peace on earth is right here if the will is strong enough to take it back. But we have the answers. Like you said, what would it look like if we use this technology for good?
That's very true. And that's a whole other different subject which would be amazing to talk about at a different time.
Let's do that. So, let's definitely get into that because I know you have a lot of knowledge. Hey, thanks again, and I really, really appreciate your time and your sharing. You brought big time insight into us understanding that are here on the edge, looking over the vast abyss of this wild, crazy technology and attacks and genocidal going on in this country and whatnot. And I just really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you, too. And my heart goes out to the people that need help. And if I can help in any way, let me know.
Well, you already have, because I'm going to talk to you offline here as soon as I hang up, which is right now. Thank you for listening, folks. Plain truth, and we'll catch you in the next video.